Have you ever caught yourself talking out loud when no one else was around? Maybe you were walking through a problem, rehearsing a conversation, or muttering, "Okay, focus," while trying to finish something important. And the second you noticed it, there was that tiny flicker of embarrassment, a quick glance around to make sure no one heard. Because somewhere along the way, we learned that speaking to yourself is strange, maybe even a little unstable. But here's the psychological reality. Talking to yourself is not only normal, it can be a sign of a highly active, organized, and self-aware mind. Let's start with something simple. When you speak to yourself, what are you actually doing? You're externalizing your thoughts. You're taking the silent dialogue already happening inside your brain and giving it sound. That internal voice you hear when you read this sentence, that's called inner speech. Most people experience it constantly. Speaking to yourself is just turning the volume up. And interestingly, research shows that this can actually improve cognitive performance. In studies where participants were asked to find specific objects, those who said the object's name out loud found it faster. Why? Because speaking activates additional neural pathways. It strengthens focus. It sharpens intention. It's like giving your brain a clearer instruction. Think about a child learning something new. They often talk through tasks step by step. Put the block here. No, not there. Here. That's not random chatter. That's the brain organizing behavior. As adults, we simply internalize most of that process. But when a task becomes complex, stressful, or important, we sometimes revert to audible self-guidance. It's not regression, it's strategy. There's also an emotional layer. People who speak to themselves often use it as a regulation tool. Imagine you're anxious before a presentation. You whisper, "You've got this. Just breathe." In that moment, you're not being irrational. You're activating self-soothing mechanisms. Studies in psychology suggest that addressing yourself in the second or third person, like saying your own name, can actually create emotional distance from stress. It allows you to coach yourself the way you would a friend. And that's powerful. Because one of the biggest predictors of resilience isn't whether someone avoids stress, it's whether they can guide themselves through it. Self-talk becomes an internal compass, a way to process confusion, rehearse decisions, or confront fear. Now here's where it gets deeper. People who talk to themselves often have strong metacognition. That simply means thinking about thinking. They don't just experience emotions, they analyze them. They step outside of their reactions and examine them. Speaking thoughts aloud can slow them down just enough to observe them. And observation is the first step toward control. But let's be clear about something important. There's a difference between healthy self-talk and distressing auditory hallucinations. Healthy self-talk feels voluntary. You know it's your voice. You can start and stop it. It helps you think. It doesn't command you or feel intrusive. That distinction matters. In psychologically healthy individuals, self-talk is a tool, not a symptom. Creativity is another major factor. Writers, athletes, programmers, artists, problem solvers, many of them speak aloud while working. Why? Because language structures thought. When ideas are swirling abstractly, putting them into spoken words forces clarity. It's like turning fog into outlines. There's also a social rehearsal component. If you've ever practiced an argument in the shower or replayed a conversation while pacing your room, you were doing something very human. Your brain was simulating social scenarios. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. Humans survive through social navigation. Practicing dialogue increases confidence and reduces uncertainty. And here's something subtle, but important. People who speak to themselves are often comfortable being alone. They don't need constant external stimulation because their internal world is active enough. Silence isn't empty for them. It's interactive. Their mind becomes both speaker and listener. But of course, society doesn't always see it that way. We're used to conversations being external, so when someone is visibly talking without a partner, it disrupts expectation. It looks unusual. Yet psychologically, it's often a sign of engagement, not detachment. In fact, elite athletes are trained to use self-talk deliberately. Before a sprint, you might hear, "Drive forward, stay low." That isn't random motivation, it's performance scripting. The brain responds to clear verbal cues. Self-instruction enhances precision. There's also a fascinating neurological angle. When you speak, even to yourself, you activate areas of the brain associated with auditory processing and executive control. You're not just thinking, you're reinforcing thought with sensory input. That dual activation can strengthen memory and focus. Now consider the emotional depth aspect. People who speak to themselves frequently are often processing complex internal experiences. They're trying to make sense of conflicting feelings. Saying something out loud forces coherence. It prevents thoughts from remaining vague and overwhelming. It gives them shape, and shape makes things manageable. But balance matters. If self-talk becomes harsh, critical, or repetitive in a destructive way, it can reinforce anxiety. The tone of the internal voice matters more than the act itself. Constructive self-talk builds resilience. Punitive self-talk drains it. So if you speak to yourself, the real question isn't, "Is this weird?" The real question is, "What kind of relationship do I have with my own mind?" Because that's what this is about, relationship. When you talk to yourself kindly, strategically, reflectively, you are demonstrating self-engagement. You are not running from your thoughts, you're interacting with them, guiding them, challenging them. And in a world that constantly demands outward attention, being able to turn inward and communicate with yourself is a form of psychological independence. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "Okay, let's think this through," don't feel embarrassed. You're not losing touch with reality, you're organizing it. You're using language, humanity's most powerful cognitive tool, to navigate your inner world. And maybe that's not strange at all. Maybe it's a quiet sign that your mind is active, reflective, and deeply engaged with itself. If this felt familiar, take a moment and notice the way you speak to yourself. Is it supportive? Is it strategic? Because once you become aware of your inner dialogue, you gain the ability to reshape it. And that's where real psychological power begins.